Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon and I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University. Welcome to Vlog 116, VUCA. VUCA. Maybe VUCA if you're posh. We'll go with VUCA. It seems appropriate after our SOC week last week that we're deploying another acronym that has some promise and some interest and some intrigue in not only doctoral education space, but also the careers and the social structures beyond it. So this vlog comes via request once more from the wonderful Anne. Anne is investigating in her PhD the nature of early childhood education and the transformations to professionalism through early childhood education and the odd positioning in organisational culture of early career educators. Fascinating thesis. So VUCA is quite an interesting strategy and way to think about the transformations in education, yes. But the terms that I'm going to talk about today via VUCA, this has a lot more potential, I think, to think about you and think about your career right now and your career going forward. Who are you? What do you stand for? How do you manage change? Ooh. So VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. How fantastic is that? VUCA. It's also fascinating in terms of its etymology. It comes from the US Army War College, and it came from a very interesting period. It came from the early 1990s where the Cold War had ended, and so the old rules about the evil Soviet Union and the white knight United States of America having a battle, those sort of easy ways of thinking about the political economy suddenly dissipated. And so who was the new threat? Who was the new army? How do we create a new environment to understand what's going on? Now, isn't it amazing how so many of the terms we deploy in understanding work, in understanding learning, in understanding education had their origins in the military? Obviously, the internet had its origins in the military, the ARPANET. So it's interesting that VUCA comes from the army. Really, really interesting. So once more, we're dealing with a term from military origins, and that's going to be quite important, I think, as we move this concept around. So VUCA tries to find a way to manage, to understand and shape an environment in which we don't know what's going on. How fantastic is that? And I think we can learn a great deal about the contemporary workplace inside and outside a university when we take VUCA seriously. Okay, so VUCA is a model. It is a strategy for change. It's also a theory to understand what's going on in our social structures. And they're theories to understand systematic failures, behavioural failures that lead into organisational failures. So this is really interesting stuff, and it offers a very significant commentary, I think, on the state of our universities, but also the state of the economy more generally. This is really gritty and interesting stuff. I've loved putting this vlog together this week, and I think it also conveys the challenges that exist in the contemporary workplace and the contemporary working environment. So let's just quickly go through the VUCA, the four, the V. The V is volatility. It recognises the speed of change that is occurring, and therefore it is difficult to understand. It's very difficult to track the changes or map the changes, let alone predict them. So the volatility. U is the uncertainty, the unpredictable nature of the economy right now. Trump, anyone? Brexit, anyone? Barnaby Joyce, anyone? So a lot of weird things are happening at the moment, and there is this sensibility that exists, this uncertainty that exists at the moment, that we really don't know what's going on most of the time. And how do we handle that? Oh, isn't this all very exciting? This is brilliant. So C, right, complexity. Complexity is, I think, the most theorised of all the variables we're talking about today. It has very good heritage in sociology from the legendary Professor Scott Lash, big hi to Scott, and also the late great Professor John Urry. So those scholars, when they were investigating the risk society, really had a strong sense of complexity theory. So complexity is a really interesting term. And what it does is it recognises that multiple forces are in play at any one time. So what's happening is we're losing cause and effect. And that means it's very difficult to plan within an organisational culture. It's very difficult to plan a career. Where are you going? How do you know if you're going to get there? And of course, strategic plans are based on the capacity to configure KPIs, key performance indicators, and then configure an operational plan that moves you from the strategic plan to the KPIs. All of that's going tremendously well, except if cause and effect doesn't work. If causality suddenly is disrupted. Oops. So the C in VUCA suggests that the notions of predictability are transforming our capacity to configure clear outcomes. So how do we plan? And of course the A in VUCA is ambiguity. The notion that there is not, was there ever, a singular way of actually determining what is going on. The multiple interpretations of every event, the multiple readings of every action is in place. I would argue it always has been in place. So the notion that all staff in a workplace would agree on a singular interpretation, would agree this is what we're doing and this is the direction in which we're going, all of that has gone. So how fascinating is it that VUCA started in a military environment, started in an army college, and has moved relatively seamlessly as a strategy and a way to theorise what's happening in the contemporary workplace. Really fascinating. And of course, in a VUCA age, how do you plan? How do we create policies? How do we actually, with predictability, move to the next stage of our lives? Wow. It is significant, I think, that management theory in particular has been drawn to VUCA very, very strongly, and we need new strategies, new ways to run an organisation, any organisation, and new ways to manage the vagaries within it. So the key is to recognise that VUCA is now a framework through which we are thinking about decision-making protocols. All this is brilliant. So how do we manage risk in this environment? How do we solve problems? But also, how do we bring a group of people along with us while we're solving those problems when cause and effect is not really in place? So VUCA is gaining some traction in education. That's why the wonderful Anne was drawn to this in terms of early childhood education, but it's got a lot of energy and traction in higher education at the moment. And it makes sense because universities and schools are very, very complex organisations. They're economically incredibly important, but also we're buffeted by an array of social and economic forces around us over which we have no control. So a lot of what happens around universities, it's sort of done to us rather than us being involved in the negotiation. Schools are very similar, a sort of top down, this is what you need to do. So that creates a very complicated place in which to make decisions that last more than a moment or a minute or a week or a year. So a VUCA-aware university recognises the complex interdependency between the social, the economic and the political, but also is prepared to work with diverse outcomes and diverse strategies to get there. It's also agile enough to change, to take the opportunities when they present themselves. So this, of course, is light years away from the traditional university, even where I was enrolled for my first degree. But I think some of the key thinkers in VUCA management are working with terms like intervention, evolution, anticipation, and preparedness. So this isn't about saying this is how we're going to do this. This is about saying let's be prepared for an array of options, an array of methods to get there, and these are the contingencies that may impact on our mission. Fantastic stuff. Now, it's no surprise that management theory absolutely adores VUCA, and Forbes magazine particularly is just obsessed by it. And they published an article last year, yes, last year, titled, we had to go here, VUCA 2.0. Anybody that adds 2.0 to random nouns, let alone acronyms, really is the first against the wall when the revolution comes. But still moving on. VUCA 2.0, a strategy for steady leadership in an unsteady world. Now that's a good subtitle. The title was a bit dodgy, but the subtitle was excellent. And this article was written by Bill George, who's a senior fellow at Harvard Business School. And he argued in this piece that the traditional ways of thinking, of working, of managing, of leading are just not working anymore. And he argued they weren't working anymore because of, quote, the volume of change that we are seeing. And I was quite drawn to that phrase. I do a lot of work on the speed of change. You know, I'm a theorist of speed, of acceleration. I do a lot of work with Paul Virilio. So I'm interested in speed and acceleration. But I think the volume of change was a really great phrase there. That means a lot is happening. You couldn't control it if you tried. It's not just speed, it's the volume of change. Now, a lot of management and leadership theory is about controlling systems, about strategic planning, forecasting, putting in goals and outcomes and reaching them. But George has created a different VUCA, a VUCA 2.0, to manage VUCA 1.0. Bless. So how do we manage volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity? Well, VUCA 2.0 is, how do we manage it? Vision, understanding, courage, and adaptability. How brilliant is that? So this VUCA 2.0 might actually be really important to your career planning. Now look, it is a bit hippie, and as you know, I'm an old goth, so I find hippie stuff a bit weird, but look, there is something there. This VUCA 2.0 might just help you work yourself out, structure yourself and work out what you believe in difficult times. So what are important commitments to you? What are you committed to? What's important? And what are you prepared to negotiate over? So vision. What do you want? What's your mission? What are your values? What's your life strategy? What's important to you, and therefore what external variables, this is risk management, what external variables exist around you that might pull you away from that vision? Wow. You, understanding, that is understanding the nature of the workplace, of universities, the nature of the economy, understanding the bigger context around you. What are the strengths of your colleagues? What are the weaknesses of your colleagues? And how do you open yourself up to listen to the views of others and really listen and transform your thinking with intellectual generosity, understanding? C, love this one, courage, the capacity to take risks. And this meant a lot to me because if there's a characteristic of the first 15 years of my academic career, it is that I was simply very happy to settle, to sit in my little university and do, I hope, a wonderful job, but really be very cautious, be very, very careful. And I used to be very conservative in my career planning. And when I freed myself from that little tiny bubble or nest, my career opened up like a flower. So yes, risks can hurt you, but risks can also make your life. Jump and the net will appear. So being courageous, being brave, does create some powerful dividends. I'm not saying be silly here. You're a really, really bright person. I know that. So assess the situation, get the information, but then be courageous. Take a risk and you will gain benefits from doing so. Okay, the last one, A. Love this one too. Adaptability. That is the capacity to survive, but also to change and to be flexible in a really volatile environment. This is key, I think. So really, this is the capacity to recognize the world has changed, the world is changing, and I've got to go with the groove thing. I've got to change with it. Now, maybe because I've moved around the world, I've worked in the best universities in the world, I've worked in the worst universities in the world. I've seen the incredible diversity of higher education and all its light and shade and fabulousness and weirdness. So adaptability is what you need to do. So I've probably been living that for the last 10 years of my life, being able to land in a new country, in a new university like a cat, and make it work for you, okay? So adaptability is the skill. A lot of the universities that we attended to do our first degree, particularly people my age, those universities are gone. They're gone. We can pretend with nostalgia that they still exist, but those institutions have gone. We have to adapt to the new modes and modalities of higher education if we're going to survive. The question now, I think, for a lot of us who, like me, perhaps about my age, have maybe a couple of decades left in this system, and a lot of our younger students have 30 years or 35 years left in the system, is how are you going to render yourself agile enough for a VUCA university? Agility is becoming the major word, I think, of this decade. And we've got this slightly awkward phrase that makes me sort of cringe a little bit, but the phrase is the learning agile. The learning agile. Now, if anyone is part of this group, the learning agile, it is a PhD student. It's like those conversations we had in those vlogs on the knowledge economy. If anyone's a citizen of the knowledge economy, then hello, it must be a PhD student. So it really is up to universities and also people like me to talk about the value of your degree, the capacity, the passion, the joy, the interest of doing a PhD and the skills you gain on the way through for a VUCA world. So the nature of a VUCA world is every single one of us is going to have to learn and learn quickly. What worked yesterday is probably not going to work today. And the thing is, isn't that what research teaches us? Isn't that the point of research? We can hope or we can predict that that will be the outcome, but you know what? It often isn't. Research prepares us for unusual outcomes, unpredictable outcomes, and we learn to handle it, manage it, systematize it, and go again. So do have a think about the use of VUCA to understand contemporary work, the workplace. We see once more that completed PhDs and all our PhD students can really operate well in this new environment. You may not work in a university after your graduation. About 60% of you won't work in a university, but you too will be working in a VUCA environment, a VUCA job. But you are really well prepared for this new age. And who knew this was even a thing? But it is, and you are ready for it. So thank you to the wonderful Anne for this fascinating suggestion. I've really enjoyed preparing this vlog. And as always, I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.